Hello chess fans, I just finished my second round game at the European Club Cup and what a game it is. It almost took 5 hours. Incredible things were happening on the board. So the first thing I did after finishing the game, apart from analyzing a bit with my opponent, is going back to the hotel room and record this video because I'm absolutely thrilled to share my experiences with you. I'm playing in this game with the white pieces against Dutch FIDE master Marijn Otte. He's of my age. We used to play in Dutch youth championships. I think I've never played him before actually, but he's a good player and well, incredible things were happening in this game. So here we go. I'm playing with the white pieces and I do play here the move 1e4. And as expected, we do get the Sicilian Najdorf. So the open variation, and here we are, move a6. It's the Najdorf. I decided to go for bishop e3, which is the so-called English attack. But my opponent played here knight g4, and this is very well-known theory, but I didn't feel really ready for it. So I decided to go back with the bishop to c1. He goes knight f6. So here I was deciding, okay, I don't want to make a repetition. How do I go to get a position where I can also try to outsmart my opponent here in the opening? I went for the line with bishop d3, which is actually quite popular, and okay, my opponent also was a bit surprised by this move. He decided to go knight c6. I take the knight, he takes back, and now I castle. He goes for the move e5, and I decided here to play the move b3 with the plan of placing my bishop on this diagonal. Maybe I could have considered instead to playing the move f4 right away, which is probably a bit more aggressive, maybe a bit more precise even as well. Anyway, I think b3 is an interesting move. Bishop e7, bishop b2, castle kingside, queen e2. So finally I've completed my development. The rooks are connected. He goes for the move bishop g4, attacking the queen, and he's provoking me to move my queen to an inferior square or to play the move f3, which is what I did. Queen was under attack, but now after f3 the bishop goes back to e6. I go rook a1, and here you can see that black has an extra pawn in the center, and he really would like to go for a move like d5 anytime soon, but with the queen on e2 I'm ready to take on d5 in that case, and the pawn on e5 is vulnerable. So we therefore get to see quite a bit of maneuvering in this game. Knight d7 was played, and here I decided to go for the move bishop c4, offering the exchange of light squared bishops, as during the game I felt this is quite a good trade. However, after bishop takes bishop, I take back with the queen, queen to b6 check. He goes for the move king to I go for the move king to h1, and he goes rook fd8. And frankly speaking, I was a little bit surprised by this move, as I felt that now I may get some attacking chances against his king, especially the pawn on f7 is a possible target. But if I do play a move like f4, he is going to take, rook takes, and put a knight on e5, and that's something I really don't want to allow. I feel like black is rock solid in that case. So I came up with this idea. I dropped back with the queen to e2, and my idea was basically to find a way so that the queen can come over to the king side to build up this sort of an attack. He played knight c5, and well, I'm not sure if this is a right move or not. He probably wants to go with a knight to e6. I played here queen f2 to prevent that idea, as the queen on b6 will be hanging in that case. Therefore, he dropped back with the queen, so that after queen g3, he can actually play knight e6. So still, it's very solid. I felt my bishop is a bit better than his, but his bishop is defending very good pawns. So it's still very difficult to break through for either side. I played knight a4. I thought this was an interesting idea, so that I do open up the diagonal for the bishop, and I was thinking about maybe to go f4. If he ever is gonna take, I can take back with the rook, and here you can see there are potential mating ideas against the pawn on g7. So my opponent really surprised me with his next move, f6, because generally speaking it's not a good idea to place pawns on a dark square, because it will make this bishop look worse on e7. But it's in fact a very interesting idea, as he is planning here to play the move d5. The rook and the queen and the pawn on c6, they are supporting that pawn break in the center, and thanks to this move f6, the pawn on e5 will still be protected. Therefore, I played here queen g4, attacking the knight on e6. He played king f7. I went queen h5, king g8, queen g4, king f7. This is what I did here in the game, to repeat the moves once, to gain some time and get closer to move 40, because the time control is actually 90 minutes for 40 moves and then 30 minutes extra. So here on move 26 I was getting lower on time. I felt like repeating moves is a good idea. But I don't want to make a draw, don't get me wrong. That was not the idea of repeating moves. I really was trying to find a way to sharpen up things. And I played here a very good move, g3. As my plan is to go for the move f4 to open up the f-file, and well, the knight on e6 will not feel great with huge pressure against the pawn on e5 in that case. But anyway, now things are getting fantastically sharp now. He played d5, which is a move I had been anticipating, and still I may have considered here the move f4, but to be honest, I was a little bit carried away with some bizarre tactical idea. As, look at this guys, I sacrificed my bishop on e5, and this could have been a brilliant idea. He cannot take the bishop because it runs into queen f5 check. If the king goes away, I take his knight. He therefore would have to block with the bishop, but now my plan had been to go queen takes e6, sacrificing the queen. After king takes knight c5, I do regain the queen, and in this endgame, well, I'm attacking the rook on d8. He cannot trap my knight. I can always get back with the knight to c5, and I'm a healthy pawn up. That is what I had been hoping for. But then all of a sudden, look at this insane move. He played here h5. He didn't take the bishop, but he played the move h5 with the idea to attack the queen. Now, I have to think about what is gonna happen, because I need to save the queen. I decided to take her with the queen on h5, a second pawn, but now he goes for the move g6, and now both the queen and bishop are hanging. Queen h7 check, knight g7, and look at this. I don't have time to move my bishop away, because he's also threatening here to go rook h8 and trap the queen. Therefore, I played bishop takes f6. I take a third pawn for the bishop. I'm threatening to take the knight, so he has no time for rook h8. He played here bishop takes f6, and I felt under huge pressure here, as well, he has this idea to go rook h8, and I really felt I have to move my queen. Apparently the best move according to the machine here is e5, which I didn't consider at all. Well, there are a lot of crazy ideas here, but definitely rook h8 is not really recommendable here because of the move e6 check, and he cannot take with the knight because it's pinned. If he takes with the king, I can take on g6, and things are looking quite good for white. I mean, instead of going rook h8, there is this idea to go bishop takes e5, and well, apparently I can go f4, attacking the bishop. He still cannot go rook h8 because the f-file will be opened. I can take his bishop with check. If the bishop moves, I can go for the move f5, hitting the pawn on g6 once again. If he takes with the pawn, I can go rook takes f5, and insane complications here. The idea is to sacrifice my rook and the other rook comes in. Apparently the best thing to do here is queen e7, rook f1, queen e4, and well, apparently this may lead to a draw according to the machine. It's no way I would have found this line. And anyway, therefore, instead of e5, I decided to save my queen. I felt like, okay, things have gone wrong for me, but at least I do have 3 pawns. And well, objectively speaking, black is in really good shape here. I really believe that his extra piece is worth more than my pawns. The pawns are not threatening anything at this point. And during the game, I was mainly concerned about a move like queen e7 to centralize the queen, and my knight is kind of stuck on a4, cannot go, cannot return back into the game. But my opponent, also getting lower on time, decided here to aim for simplifications, and I think that's what is going wrong for him at this point. He takes on e4, but I do have this move knight c5. Instead of taking back, I hit his queen and the pawn on e4. Still, he can go queen e7. I think black should still be better, but he decided to play here queen c8 and offer the exchange of queens, which I did accept. I take on c8, and now I decided here to take back with the knight on e4. However, it's better to take with the pawn, as now the knight remains out of play. It cannot go to f5 and then come into e3. But I felt that with the knight on e4, I'm rock solid. But apparently with a move like knight f5, black is dealing with both the threat of knight d6, as white can set up a knight fork, but he's also intending here to go for the move knight e3. Instead, my opponent continued with trading off pieces. Rook takes d1, rook takes d1, rook d8. So here also all the rooks are coming off the board. And we have this endgame in which black has a bishop and I have 3 pawns. And both we have a knight. King g2, knight f5. I really want to centralize the king. But if I go king f2, there is this move bishop to b6. And I have a huge problem because where is the king going? If I go to e2, there's knight e4 with a massive knight fork. He's going to win a pawn back. And that's good news for him. So I realized that I cannot centralize the king here yet. I play the move c3 to cover the d4 square. Bishop e7, king f2. And well, honestly, I feel that black is not really able to use his extra piece. There are no clear targets. All my pawns are pretty well defended. And, well, maybe black has to accept that the position is pretty even. And he can just go for king e6, for instance. And I think objectively, both sides cannot really make progress. But he played knight d6, which is still playable. But after king e3, exchanging the pair of knights, I have a very active king. So here we have this exciting endgame of bishop versus 3 pawns. He goes bishop f6. He's attacking the pawn on c3 and I go king d3. King e6. I play here the move a4 as my general plan. And I don't feel like I'm taking any risks of losing the game. I felt in worst case, I always can go b4, c4, play b5 to trade off these remaining pawns. And then later I can, with my 3 versus 1 on the king side, I can always exchange his remaining pawn. But at the same time, I also believe that I do have potential of creating passed pawns on both sides of the board. So I am the one trying to play for a win here. That's what I felt during the game. My opponent played king d6. I played here the move b4. And now things are getting really interesting, guys. This is where the game is starting. My opponent played here the move c5, and I think that is actually a serious mistake. He can make waiting moves, and I can try to push my pawns on both sides of the board, but probably it's still equal. But he goes for the move c5. But now I have the chance here to advance the pawn to b5. Pawn takes, bishop to d8. The bishop is controlling the b6 square, so I'm not able to advance the pawn at this point. But I have always the possibility here to play the move c4 and create a protected passed pawns, which means that his bishop or king always got to stay on that side of the board. And my plan is to go king e4, create a passed pawn at the other side of the board. Now, this is very important moment, as I felt I can first play here the move king e4. And probably I should instead have started with the move c4. It's more precise, but it's incredibly complicated. But I played king e4 with the idea I can go here for the move c4 anyway. And that's what I had been calculating in time trouble. This is the key move for black to try. He can go here for the move c4, so that I don't get a protected passed pawn. However, after king d4, bishop b6, he's giving up the pawn on c4, but he can activate the bishop. He can force me to place the pawns on the light squares and then fix the pawns on the king side. So I am not able to create a passed pawn here yet. And well, unfortunately, even if I try to break through with the king via the queen side, he just puts the king on c7, and this bishop is a fantastic defender from long distance. Instead, there are still insane lines, and I was even thinking about sacrificing this f-pawn, so that after gf4, king d3, well, the king is back in time, can stop the pawn, and hopefully, well, I have 2 connected passed pawns on both sides of the board. Objectively, it should still be a draw. He can put a king on e5, should be a draw. But man, oh man, this is impossible to calculate in time trouble. Anyway, my opponent played very quickly the move king e6. He didn't take the move c4 seriously. Therefore, I played c4 now anyway myself. Bishop c7, and I have the chance here to create a passed pawn on the king side. Bishop b6, g4, bishop d8, and here I go for the move f5. G takes f5, G takes f5. Here, if the king goes to f6, I can just go king d5. I will pick up this pawn, and then these 2 connected passed pawns, they will be decisive, as black cannot stop them, as there's also still an h-pawn playing an important role in this endgame. So therefore, my opponent played king d6. I played h3. I felt it could be a useful move. Maybe it's not needed, but better plays the pawn on a light square so that his bishop can never really attack it. Bishop to g5 played, and now things are getting very interesting. I played king f3. He goes king e5 and I go king g4, attacking this bishop. The bishop got to go back, and the bishop is now controlling both these diagonals. But that's simply too much work for this bishop. I played here the move h4, and here eventually I'm breaking through, because if he goes back with the king, I can walk in with my king in the same way as I've shown you in the other line. So that's not going to work. He played king d4. That's the critical move. But look at this. I go h5. I give up the pawn on c4. And he's threatening here to take the pawn on b5. And even if I'm running here with the pawn, he can take. And then the bishop comes to f6. And he will stop both pawns on the same diagonal. And it's actually black who is actually now playing for a win. However, I came up with a fantastic study-like winning idea for white. As I played here this move b6. I'm running with this pawn to deflect the bishop from its defensive duties. Now, look, for instance, you should stop the pawn somehow, but how to do it? I mean, you can do it with the king or with the bishop. In the game, my opponent took with the bishop, but if you go king b5, this is also what I've been calculating. I can go for the move b7, then he should stop the pawn, and then I go f6. If he goes king c6 to attack the pawn, I play here the move f7, and I'm threatening to promote a pawn. And this bishop is now stopping both pawns, but since it's not on the same diagonal, I can promote one of my pawns. Bishop captures the queen, and now I get another queen. So that is the trick I'm aiming for in this endgame. My opponent played the critical move bishop takes b6. I push the pawn to f6, and here he has to go back. He got to stop this pawn. The king cannot no longer do that. The bishop has to go back. And now, very important thing. I played here the move f7 and it's game over. My opponent resigned. But this was still incredibly tricky. Let me show you why. f7 is the winning move. After bishop e7 here, I'm running now with my other pawn. This pawn is out of reach. And if he goes bishop f8, I go h7. And here again, it's the principle that the bishop is not a good defender on two different diagonals. I promote one of the pawns, and then I have a queen, and that's easily winning. However, I have to admit that at this point, calculating this position from afar, I spotted, fortunately in time, that king f5 is not a good move. This was my intended move, and basically if I have the chance to save this pawn and run with the h-pawn, the bishop can never stop it. However, there is an absolutely amazing defensive idea here, as black can give up the bishop for the pawn. King takes f6. Now, very important that the king goes to b3. That is what I saw in my calculations. And look at this. There's h6, c4, h7, c3. I queen my pawn. I'm faster. But after the move c2, it's a theoretical draw. And that's absolutely amazing, because if my king had been on another square, I could just have played here the move queen a1 to cover the c1 square and prevent the king from coming to b2. However, because this is a c-pawn, a bishop's pawn, it's a theoretical draw. And I would like to show you that as a final endgame lesson, as after queen b8, I'm not able to make progress. I can give checks or I can attack the pawn. He comes closer with the queen. I come closer with the queen, sorry. I'm still a heaper from my game. As you can hear, king a1, queen c3, king b1. And this is a very important position to remember, guys, because now if I do go in front of my pawn, I have time to bring my king. But after king a1, I cannot make progress. He's threatening to promote a pawn, and after queen takes c2, it's stalemate. I'm very happy that I managed to spot that defensive resource in time, and instead I played the move f7, my opponent resigned. Man, oh man, what a day. I'm very, very relieved that I managed to win this game after this horrible piece sacrifice. I mean, it was a very interesting idea and objectively still playable, but man, I made life so difficult for myself. Well, anyway, I hope you did enjoy watching this game. Tomorrow is round 3, and let's see with whom we are going to play in that round. So, help the channel to grow, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.